Welcome back, everyone, to part 2 of my ranking of every movie that I saw in 2021. So we left off with number 51, which was Spencer. I've said all my thoughts on that, so we're going to move on to part 2 with the top 50. These are the mid-tier movies, so movies that were not bad, but not great. Number 50, Cruella. So Cruella is a character that is fascinating in the original movie, 101 Dalmatians. She's just a cold-hearted villain, and I wanted to see more of that. The problem here is that they make her too sympathetic. So when you look at Cruella, she's just a character that you want to hate. And watching this movie, I kept finding ways to try to not like her, and they just made her have a compelling backstory, give her actual emotions, gave her motives to do the things she wanted to do, and it just kind of ruined her character for me. Look, I thought it was a very artfully crafted movie. I actually loved the production design, the costume design, the makeup, the hair. It was all great. It really popped. I love the 70s soundtrack. But the thing that didn't work for me was that they made Cruella into a totally different character. So I hope that if they make a sequel, they kind of rectify that and change her more into the classic villain that we all know she is. Coming in at number 49 is Venom, Let There Be Carnage. Now, this is a huge improvement over the first movie. The first movie is dull and just tonally inconsistent and has nothing special about it besides the kind of, rom-com dynamic between Venom and Eddie, which is really great. I love that in both movies. But this one just has so much more of a voice to it. There are some cool scenes. I love the animated backstory for Carnage. Carnage, they did what they could with him. I mean, it was a 90-minute movie, so they couldn't really flesh his character out fully, but Woody Harrelson served his purpose. I thought he was fine. I'm glad they got rid of the terrible hair from the end of the first movie. I know it was more comic accurate, but comic accurate does not always mean good, so I appreciated that. Tom Hardy was great, and of course the end credit scene that turned out to be nothing really, because in Spider-Man they just undid it, but it does leave a little bit of a trace for things in the future regarding the multiverse and the symbiote itself. Number 48 is going to be Those Who Wish Me Dead. This is an Angelina Jolie thriller that premiered on HBO Max in May. I enjoyed a lot of parts of it. John Bernthal was great. Angelina Jolie was great as this kind of like conflicted character. There wasn't much to her, but there didn't need to be. It was an action thriller that really felt more 90s than it did 2021, but it's good to have some throwback movies from now and then just because it kind of threw you into the action. Didn't have much to say, but it didn't need to. The action was good. I loved the fire at the end. It was beautifully shot. And just the whole thing had like a nice feeling to it, like a nice warm sort of thriller, but also family kind of vibe to it, so I like that a lot. My one major gripe with it is that the kid who was the secondary protagonist of the movie was really annoying and not good at acting at all. There are so many better child actors out there. I just felt like he lacked like the soul that you need to be a good child actor. I felt like someone like Noah Jupe, who even is a little bit older than this kid, would have been a lot better in the role. Number 47 is going to be Fear Street Part 2, 1978. So this is by far the best out of the Fear Street trilogy. The first one, like I said, formulaic, just goes with the same old tropes. Part 3 is just a mishmash and it's clunky and doesn't work. Part 2, though, actually provided a pretty stylistic story with good characters. Sadie Sink was a great protagonist. I like her and everything. And the ending was quite unexpected. I mean, it was graphic, but I was actually shocked by the ending, which is something that I cannot say for either of the first or the third movie. Number 46 is going to be Being the Ricardos, the biopic for Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz that released Christmas Day on Amazon Prime. So I'm a big Sorkin fan. I love The West Wing. I loved Trial of Chicago 7 last year. That was one of the best movies of last year, I think. But this just kind of lacked the spark that normally goes in his movies. I think it might be that he was so involved in every step of the production. I think he was director, producer, writer. It was his piece of art. And so when somebody that good at a very specific set of things is left unchecked in the process of creating a movie, there can be some things that go wrong. Nicole Kidman was great. One of her best performances, I would say, to date. She really captured the whole aesthetic of the 50s, and the voice was great, and the way she kind of like switched back and forth between the comedy and the drama of it was really admirable. Javier Bardem was pretty good too. I don't know if he'll get an Oscar nod for it, but she definitely should, because that was an inspired performance. Number 45 is going to be Army of Thieves, the prequel to Army of the Dead, coming out only about 5 months after the Army of the Dead came out. It's a very short time window for a prequel to come out. I enjoyed it a little bit more than the first one. I felt like the first one was so bogged down by just the Snyderisms that come into play with every one of his movies. Not anything bad about him. It's just that he finds a way to just make his movies less watchable than ones that might stem from his ideas. So this one was a nice, lighthearted prequel. It had zombies involved, but it was not a zombie movie. It was just a nice heist movie. He was super charming. It felt a little bit kind of shallow, and the writing wasn't great at times. Visually, it was great. The Hans Zimmer score really brought some life to it. I did feel like some of the characters were lacking. Not him, he was really well developed, but some of the side characters, it felt like it was just an obligatory band of thieves that he was working with. So they were forcing some of the characters, but otherwise had a really great vibe to it. Number 44 is going to be No Sudden Move. Now, I had been wanting to watch this movie for months after it came out. I had seen it and I was like, Benicio del Toro, Don Cheadle, directed by Steven Soderbergh. I love Ocean's 11. So I've been always wanting to get around to watching it. And I finally did around Christmas time, and I will say the first 2/3 of this movie really disappointed. The pacing was slow, the acting wasn't great, the writing was formulaic and typical, and I just wasn't really excited about anything that was happening on screen. They were shooting with these weird, wide fisheye lenses that kind of blew everything up, and if there was like a hallway scene or a wide shot, it made it look like the characters were getting bigger and then smaller and then bigger, and it just took away from the experience. Once Matt Damon showed up, I realized everything came together in my mind, and I was like, oh, this is actually really interesting. But when it takes you almost, I guess, over an hour and a half to kind of get to that point, and to bring in Matt Damon just to save the movie, I can't really give it higher than the placement I'm giving it right now. Number 43 is going to be Malignant, which is James Wan's new horror movie. This one was a lot of fun. It was just ridiculous, like off the walls, like just the most outlandish things you can think of. It was ultra violent, but also really funny because it was making fun of itself in a lot of ways. The budget was way higher than a movie of this type would ever be in a normal circumstance, but because James Wan has made various production companies and studios so much money over the past 10 years with Conjuring and Aquaman, they just let him kind of run free with it. And honestly, I love that. Like, the fact that this is a movie is awesome because, like, there's a totally unknown cast. I'd heard of none of the people in the movie. And the idea is just so original that I was just, like, I was laughing and being scared out of my mind for the entire movie. It was such a fun time that I would totally watch it again. The one thing is that the writing and the acting weren't all that great. Like I said, totally unknown cast. There's probably a reason for that. These actors were kind of emotionally dull and didn't really have anything going for them. So I had fun watching it because of the grotesque horror and just the totally outlandish and original ideas. But as far as the actual characters go and the actual story was, it wasn't all that compelling. Coming in at number 42 is going to be The Card Counter, Oscar Isaac's new vehicle toward his ever-growing stardom, and he gave a great performance here. Ty Sheridan's also in it, Tiffany Haddish. It was a fun dynamic, but the atmosphere just felt totally off the whole time. At some points it felt like a casino commercial, like the production design was just totally bland and uninteresting. It just looked kind of like what you'd see if you walked into this environment. There was no kind of flair to it, and Paul Schrader is normally a director that has a very strong voice in his movies, or the ones that he writes at least. So I was expecting kind of more of a feel to it, and because of its unnatural aspect ratio, I was expecting some kind of unsettling or weird shots, but mainly it was just focusing on the characters. So there wasn't much creativity in the cinematography or the way the story was done visually. The interest for me was in the characters and their pasts, and especially the plot about Willem Dafoe was super interesting. Willem Dafoe has had a fantastic year. I mean, this, The French Dispatch, Spider-Man, the Snyder Cut, Nightmare Alley. I mean, he was in 5 movies this year. Like, what actor in their 60s can do that? Apparently him. So the scenes in the prison were great. I mean, they're terrifying to look at because of just the fact that I knew that it was true, and this is actually based on real events. Number 41 is going to be Fatherhood, which is a Kevin Hart movie, surprisingly enough. Kevin Hart has not been known for doing these kind of contemplative and slow family dramas, but here we are, and it actually wasn't bad. It starts with his wife dying of childbirth, which is really off-brand for a Kevin Hart movie, which is usually like an action comedy. So from the very beginning, I was really interested in the plot itself, and I knew that it had a lot going for it. As it went on, I kept enjoying it. It just felt like there was a bit of originality missing. Like I felt like the first 10 minutes were so gripping that the rest of the movie kind of just like flowed on. It wasn't bad. The cast was good. The acting was good. There was a little comedy here and there. Of course, that was great because Kevin Hart's super funny in everything he's in. But there was just something missing from the actual story at a certain point. Like it just felt like it was your typical grieving, moving on, raising a child. Like there wasn't much to the rest of it. And although the girl who played his daughter was really good, it just felt kind of flavorless to me for the rest of it. Bringing us into the top 40 is Ron's Gone Wrong. So I did not see this in theaters because I was just predicting from day one that I saw the trailers that it was going to be horrible. I said, oh, a boy and a robot. Sounds like Big Hero 6, but just far less interesting. So I didn't go see it. I didn't read the reviews until it ended up on Disney Plus a couple months after it was in theaters. And I said, all right, why not watch it, right? And it was much better than I thought it would be. It still had some moments where I was like, okay, this is unnecessary. There was some branding stuff where it's obvious that Disney kind of swooped in at the last moment when they bought Fox and was like, let's just plop in some Marvel and Star Wars characters right here just to make it more recognizable to the audiences, which is fine, but I also get a little annoyed by. In Free Guy, it was a little more cleverly done, and this was just there to exist. And Zach Galifianakis actually made me laugh a few times, many times, as Ron. So it was an original idea. I thought it was going to be a Big Hero 6 ripoff, but it turns out they were able to create a totally new story that actually had something to say. Number 39 is going to be The Dig. So this movie came out, I guess, the beginning of the year on Netflix. It stars Ralph Fiennes and Carey Mulligan, two actors that I feel like are severely underrated, but are both really good in this movie. So it centers upon an excavation. It took place in Europe, in England, in the period of World War II, and there's some really interesting character dynamics here. There's a lot of like kind of back and forth between the two leads. The main character's really interesting, and I feel like it could have been developed a little bit further. There were some unnecessary plot threads that kind of came in. There was a character played by Lily James who kind of just existed to add another layer of nuance to the movie, and I feel like it wasn't really needed because she was involved in a whole romance plot, and it just felt kind of unnecessary to where it was going. Number 38 is going to be The Green Knight. So this is one of the weirder movies of this year. You don't know what's real, you don't know what's a dream, you don't know what's, in the physical world, in the metaphysical world. It's all a blur. Dev Patel is great. This is probably one of his best performances to date. And the kind of different places that he goes throughout his journey are really interesting. I loved the one with Aaron Kellyman and the skull at the bottom of the river. That was really awesome. Cinematography-wise, the whole movie was beautifully shot. Like I was impressed throughout the entire thing. The giants just look so lifelike and real, especially seeing it on the big screen. As far as the negative stuff for this, it was just kind of that movies like this aren't always my thing. It was just a little bit too weird for my liking. As far as enjoyment of watching a movie goes, there were a lot of just things that felt super unsettling, kind of unnecessary. But like I said, visually and acting-wise, really good stuff from this movie. Number 37 is going to be In the Heights. So, In the Heights is one of my favorite Broadway shows, and I saw the movie on opening night. As you can see, I have the poster right here. I've had it throughout this entire video. So, I really love In the Heights. I love the story. I saw it on the stage a few years back, and I just loved it. The songs are great. Just the way that Lin-Manuel Miranda is able to capture just emotion in the way he writes songs is incredible, and this is one of the best showcases of that. But as a movie, there were just some ways that didn't translate. Like I said with Dear Evan Hansen, this didn't have as many pitfalls as that, but there were just some editing choices, some directorial choices that really just should have stayed on the stage. There was the choppy first song was one of my major gripes with this. On the stage, you see all these events happening and coinciding together, and then they come together for one big musical number. In the movie, it's edited together, so there's no kind of sense of connection, there's no cohesion to it. It's just these separate little vignettes, and then it kind of ends and cuts to the next scene. Which is why shows rarely work as movies, because when you have a scene like that, on a stage, it just feels so grand and you just like are able to see all the pieces coming together. But in a movie, it's really hard to do that when you have so many characters. I like what they did with some of the characters. I liked the more modern aspects of the plot. I think the Dreamers thing was really good for Sonny, and Mark Anthony was great. But as far as like the visual translation from stage to screen, they kind of added too many movieisms, and especially because the director of this also made Crazy Rich Asians, which is a movie that is like so out there and so in your face that I don't know if his style really worked for this story. Number 36 is going to be Free Guy, Ryan Reynolds' new blockbuster. Honestly, this is a great time watching it. Like, of course there are flaws, of course there are plot holes, of course he plays the same character he always plays, but that doesn't stop me from enjoying it. Like, it was still it was a fun time, it was heartfelt, it was full of emotion, it was full of humor and just funny characters all around. This was Jodie Comer's first performance of the year. We'll get to her second thing later. But she was really great. Her chemistry with both Joe Keery and Ryan Reynolds was really awesome, and this is her first kind of big movie, so I was really impressed to see that. Number 35 is Ghostbusters Afterlife. So, when I first heard this was happening, I thought it was a huge mistake. Because franchises from 20, 30 years ago are just coming back in the modern day right now and just being soft rebooted and just being sequeled until they're just exhausted and lifeless. Like, look what happened with Star Wars. Star Wars it went off the rails, right? So I was thinking, Ghostbusters, it's not going to work. But then I saw that all the original cast members had signed on to do it and they said it was a really great script, and I was like, okay, I have a little bit of hope for this. And then I saw it, and at the beginning I was a little bit nervous that it was going to lean a little bit more into the horror genre than the previous ones had, and it was going to kind of be a rehash of things like It or like other teen horror things where they live in small towns. But I actually found it to be really creative. And Finn Wolfhard was good, Paul Rudd was funny, but the best part of this movie, honestly, even better than the original cast returning in that ending moment and defeating Gozer again, which also represented a total lack of creativity on the director's part, but that aside, the best part was definitely McKenna Grace. To see her come into her own as a protagonist who actually has compelling character traits and like has an objective and you're able to emotionally connect with and isn't perfect was really awesome. Coming in at number 34, the first trip back to the movies for Marvel this year, Black Widow. So I found the first third of this movie to be really good. Like, I was impressed. It was dark, it was gritty, it was exploring different themes we haven't seen in Black Widow's character yet. The first 5 minutes especially gave us a window into her childhood. Like, the way the color grading worked and the scene composition was really awesome. And it felt so much darker than anything we've gotten in the MCU for the past, I guess WandaVision was pretty dark, but anyway, it felt dark in sort of an espionage sort of way that we haven't seen since really Captain America the Winter Soldier. And so I thought, wow, if the whole movie stays like this, this will be one of my favorites of all time. But once, Yelena becomes more prominent, there's more humor throughout, it just kind of falls into some of those MCU-isms. And that doesn't make it bad, it just makes it a little more formulaic than I would have liked. Number 33 is going to be Raya and the Last Dragon. So I actually didn't see this when it came out. It kind of like slipped off my radar. I just like didn't think about it for a while. And then at the end of the year when I was trying to rack up more movies for this list, I thought, okay, I'll watch this. And it was a pleasant surprise. I was thinking, okay, it might be a little bit of a copy of things that have borrowed from this culture before, like, her outfits look exactly like Katara's from Avatar. Not that that's a bad thing, but I just thought maybe it'll be a little bit of a rehash of that. But it was a totally original story. And although the ending was a little bit lukewarm, it kind of felt like there should have been more of a sacrifice. The characters were great. It was funny. It was dark. It was, it was endearing. The emotion was there. Her drive bringing her father back was really compelling, I thought. Animation was beautiful. I love when animated movies take the opportunity to really focus on small details like water. Okay, number 32, we have The Guilty. So, I know people don't like Jake Gyllenhaal this year, but I gotta say, he was good in this. And the impressive thing about this movie is that they shot it in 11 days, which is an astonishingly short production time for the caliber of actors that they got for this movie. I mean, they had, I think it was Ethan Hawke, who was one of the voice actors for the phone sequence. And of course, Jake Gyllenhaal was really good. And I love the plot twist at the end. I thought that the things they were leading up to the entire time really made that just land and hit home. And his performance in the end was really great. I feel like the ending, it could have been more climactic or even more emotional than it was, but I get that when you're telling a story mostly over a series of phone calls, it's not always going to be, the most resonant thing you've seen. All right, that brings us to number 31, which is Passing, another Netflix movie, totally different. This one was kind of a pleasant surprise. When it first came out, I saw it on Netflix and I was like, okay, it doesn't look that interesting. But one day, I decided to watch it. And I think the thing that stood out most to me about this is that nowadays it's really hard to find movies that use aspect ratio to their advantage. Most movies either just choose to do the TV aspect ratio or the widescreen. But this one specifically chose to do it in a 4:3. And a lot of movies that do it in a 4:3 aspect ratio don't exactly know what they're doing. Like, usually the goal is to make people seem more statuesque and kind of like focus on the characters more. But here, it really helped with the production design because you feel sort of claustrophobic throughout the entire thing. I think it's meant to kind of evoke the emotions that Tessa Thompson's character is feeling, which is just total like loss of control. I thought the acting was great. Ruth Negga was amazing. Number 30 is going to be Finch. Tom Hanks is back as the only person in a certain place. This is his first time doing that since Castaway, so, there are some similarities, but overall, I really enjoyed this one. I thought he was great. I thought the humor was great. It just had kind of like a lighthearted feel to it. And there were emotional parts to it. There were parts when he was talking about humanity as a whole and how it turned vicious when, the apocalypse came. And the thing that was most striking about this movie for me is the fact that this world felt like it could be our world someday. As far as that goes, like atmospherically, that was really, really cool. I felt like there was too little focus on the actual dog, which was kind of the purpose of Tom Hanks' whole expedition. The dog was kind of supposed to be the emotional core of the movie, and yet it didn't have that much screen time. Number 29 is going to be No Time to Die. Daniel Craig's final entry into the James Bond saga. So I felt like this was a nice cherry on top of his franchise. He's had a few stumbles along the way. Casino Royale was really good. Quantum of Solace was bad. Skyfall was really good. Spectre was bad. So it's kind of been this balancing act of like his performances have always been super good, but it's mostly been the writing and the story that have failed him every other movie. And so I thought if they can really pull this off and have it be a good finale to his series of 5 as Bond, I'll be impressed. And for the most part they did. It was a little bit long. I don't know that really justified it being, as long as it was. I think as far as James Bond goes, a tight 220, that's not tight at all, but I think a movie that was a little bit shorter could have succeeded in a better way. Because when we have so many returning characters, you had returning characters from Casino Royale, from Skyfall, from Spectre. It just felt like there was so much overcrowding because they had to wrap up every single part of the plot. Like they had to just like clean up Spectre and clean up, Felix Leiter and the CIA part and just like kind of erase all of Bond's ties. So at the ending, when Bond, seemingly dies, he probably did die because Craig is done, that there's no kind of like loose threads hanging, but that comes at a cost too because then you have less time to develop your villain. The movie was shot well. Cinematography is probably the best it's been in a James Bond film. Okay, number 28, we have Luca. So I know a lot of people who put this a lot higher, and I'm not saying I didn't enjoy it. Remember, this is not the bad movies list. This is the mid-tier movies list. And we're now in the top 3 of those. So this is a good movie. I enjoyed it. All the characters were great. I thought it was a nice little simplistic tale about just a boy, and I know the people have compared it to Call Me By Your Name, which I actually haven't seen. I should watch that. But I do find it funny that the director of that movie, his name is Luca, so come on, guys. They did it. It's true. Luca and Alberto, they're in love. But there was kind of a sense of urgency in the story that was missing. It just felt kind of like a series of vignettes that tied up in a nice little bow, and everyone loves each other. And it was a sad ending, but I felt like if there had been a little more cohesion to everything, it would have been a great movie. Not saying it wasn't good. It was a very good movie. Number 27 is going to be The Harder They Fall. This one had a great cast. Idris Elba, Jonathan Majors, who is not been in much, but he's blown me away with every performance. He was in Loki at the end. He was in Lovecraft Country, which was super good. So he just has a great range and is like really charismatic and just like brought a lot of life to this performance. So I thought that was super awesome. And the one thing about this movie that kind of took me away from it is that the script wasn't all that great. The acting was awesome, but the writing just felt kind of one-dimensional and thin. Like the plot was a little bit shallow. I enjoyed the dynamics between all of them. The Production design was super cool. Like visually, it was awesome how they were able to kind of contrast color. And when they were in the White Town, how everything was just totally white, and so any spot of blood would make the whole town like explode in their minds, seeing that. Color-wise and just visually as a whole, it was shot in a really cool way. Okay, taking the top spot for the mid-tier list. Number 26 is Last Night in Soho. So, this movie I had actually been looking forward to since I saw the trailer for it in May, when I saw A Quiet Place 2, which you'll see on the next video. But I thought it was super creative, and I loved the way that the main character was kind of discovering things as we were. And I will say I figured out the twist about half an hour before she did, but it's okay. These things happen in movies. I'm not going to say it was poorly written, because I think the script was actually pretty good. I will say that the first, I guess, hour and a half of the movie felt deeper and kind of like more, I guess, mystical and mysterious than the ending was. And kind of revealing that, oh, it was actually Sandy who killed, I don't remember what Matt Smith's character was, but anyway, it was Sandy who killed them all. It was, Last Night in Soho. Just felt a little bit dry and tasteless for a movie that had been that creative for the beginning of it. And I enjoyed kind of how she was, the way that they showed her being treated poorly, and how she was kind of like alone to herself, and how she was kind of the opposite of Sandy, and so she wanted to be Sandy. And it like explained that she was drawn to this lifestyle because that's not who she was. So I think the characters were really fascinating in that way. It was kind of an interesting thing we haven't seen much in modern movies. And I'm kind of sad that it bombed at the box office, because I would have liked more people to see it. Alright, that is it for my list. I hope you enjoyed part 2 of this extremely riveting video. You can check out other videos that I have here all over. I'm guessing they're right there, maybe right here. There's probably a big circle that says subscribe to Justin right here.